we all know about the recordings that happened in the THA, but the main thing is the fact that we're not hearing the accused, right, for all intents and purposes, defending themselves. That, I think, rubs some people the wrong way. It's like, well, if it's not you, if you're innocent, say something. But there's a wider issue here, Janelle, and that's the fact that, look, the political class tends to go into this default of not speaking. When things go wrong, they don't speak. This current administration started off speaking a lot, and I remember watching the papers and seeing the public comments just dry up as more and more faux pas were made. Yeah. And I just, I'm wondering, like, look, have we reached the point where we need to tell these politicians, you can't just hide. This is not making sense.
Well, why do they hide? They hide because they know they can get away with it. They know the mindset of Trinidadians. How long are we going to remember it? So they're banking on that. The longer we stay silent, some other thing will become more topical, and we're going to forget about that. And that's how we act in Trinidad. And so they're banking on the psyche and the normal practice of Trinidadians.
Great minds think alike. Because see how Janelle and I are related somehow, because I made that same point. I think was it yesterday or the day before. I'm 100% in full agreement with you. Here in Trinidad, we have a couple hours memory.
We down from 9 days. It was 9, exactly. It went 7, it was a couple hours.
No, it was a couple hours. And I say a couple hours because we tend to forget as one big issue happens, maybe it survives a couple of days within the press because one, it sells, and two, you have perhaps the opposition or the current administration, depending on who's always speaking about it. But then Trinidadians move on because they get frustrated. We forget about it. Everybody gets away. However, that's not happening in Tobago, because this seems to be the biggest talking point coming out of Tobago within the last week. So much so that every aspect of Tobago, including the business chamber, has now commented on this issue. Everybody has spoken about it except those who are allegedly involved.
But one interesting thing, Sean used the word accused, okay? In law, the person who is accused is not the one who has to prove anything.
Well,
it's the alleger.
True, but this
so I don't know, but it's not. I know it's not a court of law. So
it's a court of public opinion.
So I don't know if
the
they're
rules
backing
flip,
on
baby.
that. If you have said it's me, well, prove it. You've just let out this audio there. No, it's not a video. You say it's me.
Now, I do believe...
How am I going to defend that?
I do believe Kelvin Morris has more or less said near the beginning that he's pinned it on, Farley Augustine. However, as much as we are looking to the THA to respond, it's not as though like the pitchforks are like, it's Farley, and we have signs against him and everything. But the irony is, because of that, because it's not as though the public seems to be all, just making that assumption one time and not even, entertaining innocent until proven guilty. The public is not there yet, but the silence actually makes it even harder to kind of keep that assumption at bay.
Janelle, may I ask you, in a court of law, there's an audio recording of voices whom we cannot put faces to. Does that ever count as evidence, or is that dependent upon the case?
Well, it depends on the case. An audio can count, but normally it is supported by the evidence of somebody. You can't just drop an audio just so. Somebody has to speak to how the recording came about. If they recorded it, how they got it, how the integrity of the recording was preserved to show, because we live in an age where things can be manipulated.
That is true.
Precisely.
So it's not just, I have an audio, I say, somebody has to come and give evidence about the audio.
And there's this issue of deepfakes as well. So let's, we're being open and honest here, and we must include all factors. There's a major issue globally now of deepfakes. There is a possibility, but the thing is, in this instance, as you just said, accused, normally it's the one who is making the accusations, who has to come out and say, yes, this is
Where
it.
Where did the audio come from?
But this is the thing.
I myself am not entirely sure.
I am not entirely sure. I know it just started circulating on social media. The exact source, I cannot confirm the exact source, but I would suspect if this is genuine, clearly the two voices that I heard would know who else is present and would have known who else exactly was there and possibly who was recording. If this by chance was the work of the P&M Tobago Council. It was brilliant in the sense that, again, including all factors, if there was a spy
mole, you have a
or
mole.
a mole or something like that, it was a brilliant job. I
We're getting
can't
very
say, you
But
know.
I mean, okay, if he does come on, so the two choices are either him coming to say it was me or it wasn't me.
Precisely.
So if he comes and says it wasn't me, how far does that take us? Would that be convincing to the people who believe it was him? What does it change?
The irony is the timing of it,
What
right?
does it change if he said it wasn't him? Would you believe him?
It's
He
harder now. I
he's-
think it's made it harder now with the waiting.
He's pulling a Shaggy.
And then if he says it is me, then there's so many ramifications from that.
He's not going to come out and say it was me.
So the only option is it wasn't me.
But why wait so long to say
But the
that?
thing is, you're a politician. You're supposed to be versed in the craft of the gift of the gab, or at least I would think so, because you say silence is golden. I think we, just for reference in this conversation, I think we have some extremely poor excuses for ministers, but they still have the gift of the gab, which kind of helps them along the way. For me, yes, okay, even if silence is golden, in this instance, it's now muddying the waters very
Silence
badly.
is unacceptable in this situation. It really normally would call for someone to say something, all right? People are alleging something very serious. But I'm very practical. I'm still saying to myself, well, even if he comes and what could he possibly say that would convince those, and I'm not actually very familiar with his voice, but everybody I've spoken to seems very convinced about it one way or the other. If he said it wasn't me, how far does it take us? That is the question I've been mulling over in my mind. Does that make it more likely we'd vote for him? Would it make it less likely? Does it make the situation, would it be better or worse than now?
Right, so, and that speaks to the wider issue because, usually, I would agree with you all. Yes, I mean, just in this administration alone, it seemed as though one controversy is usually overwritten by the succeeding controversy. The irony, of course, is that more recently, it tends to be back-to-back government issues. Whereas before, the government opposition might have traded off with who's going to say something foolish today, right? But we have seen situations where I think, to some extent, for the past government, their excesses did not help their re-election. Now, granted, their re-election campaign was also bad. But also the government before that, the Honorable Patrick Manning, he had to call a snap election because the calls, the cries of the commentary of, this is they take the ship and he's doing this and this and that, and some of it coming from his own bench, it to some extent forced his hand. To some extent.
I kind of disagree, but that's a different topic. I think that was an unnecessary move, but maybe it's just hindsight is 2020.
I think and the issue that we're discussing, though, it stems from a situation in Tobago, audio clip circulating on social media.
Well, you saw where the commentary, affected the situation.
All right, okay, but the point I'm making is that this is a general conversation. It is something that all politicians should take heed of, because I would accept that at times it is better to stay quiet rather than rush into making a statement. But the mere fact that Trinbagonians, because it's Trinidad as well, it's not just Tobagonians, have actually allowed this story to stay alive.
Commendable
right?
on our parts.
Which is
it has been in the news a little bit longer than I thought it would be.
But this is precisely why it shows that if we really cared and if we really wanted to, we can actually put up a stance.
But is it the general public, Trinidadians and Tobagonians have been speaking on? I can't say that I've necessarily seen on social media. You could go on social media and see comments from the general public about an issue. I feel like it's people in certain industries speaking about it, but I'm not seeing mass conversations, posts about the topic.
One needs to ask the question on social media in a lot of the avenues. Is it the general public or is it diehards / activists? Not all of them are activists.
Yes,
and that's what I'm saying. Sometimes when a topic is hot enough, regular people on my social media would talk about it, not people are activists or have a particular stand. You would just see people talking, but I don't think I'm seeing a lot of people. Have you?
To Ketan's point, the fact that even just having the media and the talking heads stay on the topic, that is still a bit of an accomplishment Except my caveat is, I do wonder, is it because we just haven't had a big enough story to kind of override it, to overtake it?
There is a big story that, and it's not a controversy, and I'm very much displeased at the fact that we have not addressed it as yet, and that is with respect to Tobago's presidency at the UN General Assembly. Which
yes,
is
a very positive news point.
Last week we were speaking about positive news.
Yes.
And this is what I'm saying. So as much as, and I'm segueing a bit here,
Yes.
because the point is, it has stayed alive due to the talking heads of certain industries, due to medias such as us. I mean, this is probably the 4th time we've brought up this topic. But it is a very important topic. And as I said, from a general perspective as well, not just for this particular clip. But I'm thinking to myself, last week I was asking Janelle about
Yes.
good news.
Yes.
And I think we've gotten some excellent news, the best news that we've gotten in quite some time.
Yes.
And
But that broke this morning, yes?
yesterday.
Yes.
Yesterday morning.
Yes.
And to be very honest with you, this is something that we need to highlight more, because if we're constantly highlighting negativity because we're plagued by negativity. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. But this is, could you imagine
Yes.
Trinidad and Tobago, a small island in the Caribbean, at the helm of the UN presidency,
of the UN
you know,
General
leading
Assembly.
the UN
Yes.
General Assembly. That is quite an
I
achievement.
think
It's
should we have a
excellent.
clapping?
Of course, let's have a clap instead, because congratulations to
Mr. Francis.
His Excellency,
His Excellency.
His Excellency Ambassador Dennis
Dennis
Francis.
yes.
Trinbagonians, I don't know if we will all truly understand what this means, but as an individual who actually studied quite a bit of international relations, I suppose, as part of my political science degree, this is quite an achievement, you know.
It's
So
quite an achievement.
segue in a bit, but the point is, while Janelle is sick, she has to go in a minute. I thought we'd bring up the good news.
We bring up the good. But
There's also, I think, a lot more positive news with the crime situation in the country. But the problem with that is each story is like a drop in the bucket. So it's not like the total is the trending down. But
I just wanted to say one thing, though. I thought about it in relation to something else. When we always say about Trinidadians not making calls for certain things, not actioning certain things, I heard it somewhere said that a lot of Trinidadians are very busy with just surviving day to day, making ends meet, going to work, feeding their children, dealing with the transportation woes, that they really don't have the space mentally, or the privilege, the word was privilege, to really be involved in all the political comings and goings, shenanigans, or even being up to date on certain issues. And sometimes I keep that in the back of my head. Is it a privileged standpoint where I can make the argument, well, why people are not concerned?
well, the problem is it's the same people who technically make up the voting population. So they need to have some idea. The question, of course, is you could never, demand the voting population to have, you all need to know everything perfectly. You can never make, that's just not practical. The question is to what extent now does each individual, no matter how busy, what extent do they have a responsibility to educate themselves on the various issues that matter, at least to them, if not to their neighbors and to anybody else, to them.
Yeah, but at the same time, we also have that responsibility. We share that responsibility. It's an important and crucial role that we play. And I agree with you. Again, I tell you, we related somehow. I have stressed it many a times before. People in Trinidad and Tobago are so consumed with just surviving the day that they tend not to take on the extra unnecessary stress of such controversies. And that is perhaps one of the reasons, because I think there are more, that we're rather complacent. But anyway, Janelle, thank you very much for your time. I'm glad I was here. And by the way, if anybody tries to downplay Trinidad and Tobago's presidency by saying Guyana, St. Lucia, and Antigua and Barbuda were there before us, no, okay, it's still an achievement. Well done, TNT.